Picture this. Christmas Eve, 1944. Moviegoers settle into their seats expecting another wholesome Deanna Durbin musical. Instead, they get murder, madness, and a torch singer working in what's basically a brothel. This is Christmas Holiday, the film noir that has absolutely nothing to do with Christmas and everything to do with how dark Hollywood could get when nobody was looking. Buckle up, because what happened behind the scenes is just as twisted as what ended up on screen, when studios traded actors like baseball cards. Gene Kelly hated this movie, absolutely despised it. And here's why. MGM literally traded him to Universal like he was a baseball card. They wanted Turhan Bey for Dragon Seed, so they shipped Kelly over to play a psychotic mama's boy murderer. Kelly's widow later admitted he thought the whole thing was weird and creepy. The guy was under contract at MGM, learning to be their next big musical star, and suddenly he's playing a character with heavily implied incestuous feelings toward his mother. Talk about a career curveball. The Oscar winner who adapted Prostitution, Herman Mankiewicz, wrote this screenplay right after winning the Oscar for Citizen Kane. The guy who gave us Rosebud was tasked with taking Somerset Maugham's novel about a British student meeting a Russian prostitute in Paris and making it acceptable for 1940s audiences. His solution? Change Paris to New Orleans, make the prostitute a nightclub hostess, and hope the censors wouldn't notice all the ladies in the background clearly working the room. Mankiewicz himself said Christmas Holiday was among the work from the 40s he was most proud of. That's saying something from a man who co-wrote the greatest film ever made. 5 days of tears on a schedule. Director Robert C. Odmack couldn't believe what he witnessed. Deanna Durbin had to cry for 5 straight days of filming. Not just a few tears. Full-on sobbing breakdowns. And here's the eerie part. Every single day at 4 p.m. sharp, she would just stop. Like flipping a switch. C. Odmack said she cried and cried, but each day at 4 p.m. sharp, she would cry no more. It was amazing. That is a real actress for you. Can you imagine that level of control? Turning your emotions on and off like a faucet? That's not just acting. That's something else entirely. America's sweetheart goes dark. Deanna Durbin saved Universal Pictures from bankruptcy with her wholesome musicals. Winston Churchill called her his favorite actress. Anne Frank had her picture pasted on the wall of the secret annex in Amsterdam. But Durbin was desperate to escape that image. She fought hard for this role, even though C. Odmack later admitted she flinched at looking too much like a tramp. He said she always wanted to look like nice, wholesome Deanna Durbin pretending to be a tramp. And yet, decades later, Durbin herself would say Christmas Holiday was her only really good film. Think about that. The one movie that destroyed her wholesome image was the only one she respected, sneaking a brothel past censors. Walter Wanger tried to make this movie in 1939. The Hays office shut him down immediately, calling it a story of gross sexual irregularities. Fast forward to 1943, and Universal tried again. They changed the prostitute to a USO hostess. Still too much. So they made her a nightclub singer. The censors complained about excessive drinking and that audiences might think the hostesses were prostitutes. Newsflash, they absolutely were prostitutes. Watch the film. Those background extras aren't selling cigarettes. The censors knew it. The filmmakers knew it. Everyone knew it. But as long as nobody said the word, they could release it to theaters full of families on Christmas. When darkness outsold sweetness. Here's what nobody expected. Christmas Holiday made more money than any other Deanna Durbin film up to that point. Over $2 million at the box office by July 1944. It beat Arabian Nights. It became Universal's most successful film of the entire year. Audiences who came expecting another musical got a gut-punch noir instead, and they loved it. Even C. Odmack was baffled. He said, oddly enough, it did very well. I suppose everyone was so interested to see what Deanna Durbin would be like in a dramatic role. The lesson? Give people what they don't expect, and sometimes they'll reward you for it. The first Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Gail Sondergaard, who plays Gene Kelly's suffocating mother in this film, made history 10 years earlier. She was the very first actress to ever win the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, for her film debut, no less. By the time she made Christmas Holiday, she'd been offered The Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz, but turned it down. And here she is, playing maybe the creepiest mother in film noir history. There's this line where Kelly tells Durbin his mother needs him to be her all. The way Sondergaard delivers her scenes, you absolutely believe it. 5 years later, she'd be blacklisted and wouldn't work in Hollywood for 2 decades. The title makes no sense. Let's talk about this title. Christmas Holiday. It takes place on Christmas Eve. Sure. There's one midnight mass scene. But that's it. That's the entire Christmas content. The rest is murder, gambling, toxic relationships, and one woman's descent into prostitution. It's like calling Silence of the Lambs Easter Picnic. Even critics at the time were baffled. One reviewer called it anything but a bearer of good cheer, with a title that serves as perhaps a cruel enticement. You think you're getting It's a Wonderful Life. You get a film where the big Christmas miracle is maybe the main character finally stops loving her murderer husband. Maybe. A song that became a standard. Spring Will Be a Little Late This Year was written by Frank Lusser specifically for this movie. The guy who'd later write Guys and Dolls composed this melancholy ballad about lost love. When Christmas Holiday came out, critics dismissed it as not too appealing. The song seemed destined to disappear. But then something strange happened. About 10 years later, jazz musicians rediscovered it. Ella Fitzgerald recorded it. Sarah Vaughan, Bing Crosby, Carly Simon. It became a great American songbook standard. The movie faded into obscurity, but the song lived on. It's still performed today. This gorgeous, sad piece of music born from a Christmas noir nobody remembers. The Broadway star who vanished. Dean Harrens was a Broadway success. That's how he got cast as the Army Lieutenant. His film debut at age 24. He appears in 7 movies total over his career. Not one starring role. He bounces around television for decades, doing guest spots on Perry Mason and the FBI. But he never catches fire. His biggest moment was walking into his very first movie and sharing scenes with Deanna Durbin and Gene Kelly. Everything after was smaller. Sometimes your first shot is your best shot, and you spend the rest of your life chasing that initial lightning in a bottle. The German expressionist refugee. Robert Siodmak fled Nazi Germany in 1933 when Joseph Goebbels was about to arrest him for making sick sultriness and airless muddleheadedness. That's what Goebbels actually said. Siodmak co-directed People on Sunday with Billy Wilder before the war, learning German expressionism. All that shadow work, those canted angles, that sense of the world being off-kilter, he brought it all to Hollywood. Christmas Holiday was shot using techniques Siodmak learned in Weimar, Germany. The cinematographer Elwood Bradell used deep focus photography that Greg Toland perfected for Citizen Kane. The result is a film that looks like it was made by someone who understood darkness wasn't just an absence of light, it was a character in itself. The critic who destroyed Durbin. Bosley Crowther at the New York Times absolutely eviscerated this movie. He called the story the oldest sort of hat. But he saved his real venom for Deanna Durbin. He wrote that her speaking voice is girlish and empty of quality, and her gestures of shock and frustration are attitudinized. Ouch. Here's Durbin trying to break out of her wholesome image, giving everything she has, and the most important film critic in America basically calls her amateur hour. Years later, Durbin said she was never happy making pictures. Reviews like this probably didn't help. When you try to grow as an artist and get publicly humiliated for it, why would you keep trying? The Wagner that predicted everything. When Durbin and Kelly's characters meet, they're at a symphony concert playing Liebestod from Wagner's Tristan und Isolde. For those who don't speak opera, Liebestod literally translates to love death. It's the climax of an opera about a doomed romance ending with both lovers dying. Mac filmed this at the Philharmonic Theater in Los Angeles with hundreds of extras and live musicians. It's maybe the most on-the-nose foreshadowing in film noir history. These two people fall in love while listening to music about how love leads to death. And that's exactly what happens to them. Subtlety was not on the menu. The Widow Who Laughed. In 2013, Gene Kelly's widow, Patricia Ward Kelly, attended a screening. She was sharp, dedicated to preserving Kelly's legacy. And during portions of the movie, she had to laugh. She admitted her husband hated it and thought it was weird. Picture that, sitting through a screening of your dead husband's work, watching him play this creepy murderer with mommy issues, and having to publicly acknowledge, yeah, he knew it was bizarre too. But here's the thing, Kelly's performance is genuinely unsettling. He plays charming until these sudden flashes of rage break through. It's exactly what the role needed, even if he wanted to forget he'd ever done it. The novel Too Dark for Hollywood. Somerset Maugham's original novel had Russian émigrés, political philosophy, discussions about communism versus fascism, and explicit prostitution. The American film? Almost none of that. Maugham's journalist character was a radical thinker with intense conversations about society. In the movie, Richard Horf plays him as a drunk who basically pimps girls to soldiers. All the intellectual content got stripped away. One reviewer called it not a film version of Maugham's story, but maybe suggested by it. Maugham's novel ends without resolution. The film tacks on a Hollywood ending where clouds part. Because God forbid we leave a 40s audience with ambiguity. The blacklist that followed. Within a decade, several key people were destroyed. Gail Zondergaard was blacklisted when her husband, director Herbert Biberman, was imprisoned as one of the Hollywood 10. Her career vanished for 20 years. Herman Mankiewicz kept working, but his reputation never recovered from the Citizen Kane authorship dispute and his drinking. The cast and crew who made this dark film about corruption and destroyed lives would soon experience their own versions of that darkness. Hollywood in the 50s showed no mercy. If you were suspected of communist sympathies or just had the wrong friends, you were done. Talent didn't matter. One accusation and you were finished. The retirement at 27. Deanna Durbin made her last film in 1948 at age 27. For the Love of Mary, that was it. She walked away from Hollywood while she was still the highest paid female movie star in the world, reportedly earning over $320,000 from Universal in 1946. That's over $5 million in today's money. She moved to France with director Charles David. She lived in a village outside Paris until she died in 2013 at age 91. In those 64 years, she granted exactly one interview. She told people she was never happy making pictures. She wanted to be nobody. And she succeeded. Most people under 50 have never heard of her. The film that disappeared. For decades, Christmas Holiday was nearly impossible to watch. It barely aired on television. No studio seemed interested in showing a Christmas movie about murder and self-destruction. The film that made over $2 million and saved Durbin's career became a footnote. Film noir scholars knew about it. Hardcore fans tracked down bootlegs. But your average person? They'd never heard of it. It's only in the last couple decades with home video and streaming that you can actually see this thing. Imagine being so successful that you become your studio's biggest hit, then being so weird that everyone pretends you never existed. The only film they made together, Deanna Durbin and Gene Kelly only made one film together. This was it. Two people remembered for wholesome entertainment made a movie about murder, prostitution, and toxic codependency. Then, they never worked together again. Kelly went back to MGM and spent the next decade creating the greatest musicals ever made. Durbin made a few more films, then disappeared. But for this one bizarre moment in 1944, two of the most talented performers of their generation shared the screen in the darkest possible material. And it worked. Against all odds, despite both being horribly miscast, Their performances create something genuinely disturbing. Sometimes the wrong actors in the wrong movie somehow become exactly right. The film Durbin loved, decades after retiring, in that one interview Deanna Durbin granted in 1983, she was asked about her career. All those wholesome musicals that made Universal millions. And which one did she think was her only really good film? Christmas Holiday. The dark, twisted, controversial noir that critics hated. That was the one she was proud of. Herman Mankiewicz felt the same way. He said it was among his 40s work that he was most proud of. The film everyone involved wanted to distance themselves from? Turns out it was the one that actually mattered. Maybe because it was the only time Durbin got to be something other than perfect. Maybe because darkness is more honest than light. Or maybe because the movies we're ashamed of are the ones that show who we really are. Christmas Holiday is a film that shouldn't exist. A Christmas noir starring two musical comedy legends, written by the guy who wrote Citizen Kane, directed by a German expressionist refugee, and somehow becoming a massive box office hit before everyone involved tried to forget it happened. It's messy, it's dark, it's occasionally brilliant and sometimes baffling, but it's never boring. So here's my question for you. What forgotten film noir do you want me to cover next? Drop your suggestions in the comments, and if you like diving into this twisted piece of Hollywood history, hit that subscribe button because we're doing this every week. I'll see you in the shadows. Merry Christmas.